guys, this is Eliza and welcome back to a new video. So today will be part 2 of the new series here on my channel. So today we'll be discussing the series that I will not be continuing reading. I'm not going to talk too in depth about many of them. I might bring up that I don't like a specific thing in the series and that is the reason why I'm not continuing, but for the most part the first book or first or second or whatever just didn't intrigue me enough to want to continue. If there's anything that I actually negatively don't like, then I might talk about it, but otherwise it'll be pretty brief as there is 48 books on this list. So these are in no particular order, we're just going to jump straight into it. So first we have the Oz series by Frank L. Baum. I have read The Wizard of Oz, or what's it called? The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, but I have not continued the series. I only listened to the first one, I think during a readathon, because it's narrated by Anne Hathaway on audiobook, which I thought was really cool because I really enjoy her and I like her voice. So I listened to that, but it's not intriguing enough to me for want to continue it. I haven't even watched the movie that many times. I think I've seen it like full, like maybe once or twice, but it's just not something that intrigues me, so I've never continued. Next we have Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan. I have read the first book, The Lightning Thief, but it did not intrigue me enough to continue reading. I honestly don't get the hype for this series. I found it pretty bland. Will not be continuing that one. Next we have the Spirit Animal series. So this is one of those series that each book has a different author. So the first book was written by Brandon Mull and it is called Wildborn. I believe I listened to this one on audiobook and it was fine, but again, not enough to intrigue me into continuing. I am like a tiny bit intrigued, mainly because I do love some of the other authors that have written books in the series, but reading the first one, it didn't intrigue me enough to want to continue. Maybe one day if the audiobook comes up for free on SCRIBD or something and I need a book with an animal on the cover or something, but it's not likely I'm going to be continuing this series. Next we have Creekwood by Becky Albertalli. I loved Simon vs. Homo Sapiens Agenda and The Upside of Unrequited. However, I did not like in the slightest Leah on the Offbeat. I found that book extremely problematic, especially when it comes to the bisexual rep. It was quite toxic and it was never really rectified in the entire book. So I will not be continuing because I do not want to experience that again and I'm just not interested. Next we have Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I actually really enjoyed Strange the Dreamer, but then when I started reading the second book, I just lost interest because the romance took over the entire plot. I didn't love the romance in Strange the Dreamer, but there was enough plot for me to be intrigued and want to continue even when the romance was my favorite. But for the second book, the part I read was entirely romance basically, and I'm just not interested. Next we have The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. This one I did really enjoy, but I've just never continued the series and it's kind of gone out of my mind and I've just slightly lost interest in continuing the series. So I highly doubt I'm going to be continuing this one anytime soon. Then we have Caraval by Stephanie Garber. So I did actually really enjoy Caraval. I rated it 5 stars. There was a couple little things I do remember not loving, but I think I really got caught up in the hype with that one. And then when I read Legendary book 2, I only rated it 3 stars. It definitely went downhill and those things that I had that little bit of a gripe with in book 1 just got even worse in book 2. So I will not be continuing the series. I will not be reading Finale, which is the finale of the series. Next we have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I've actually attempted to read this one twice. I can't remember what book I got up to on the second read, but I did remember enjoying the books, book 1 and 2, the first time I read them, but then when I tried to reread them, I just was not enjoying them at all. So I ended up DNFing that reread and I will not be continuing the series. Then we have The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani Chosky. This one I did enjoy, but I just honestly do not remember it. It just kind of went out of my brain completely. I remember enjoying it. I kept it for a while, but I recently unhauled it and I'm not interested in continuing the series because I literally do not have any memory for what the first book was about, and yeah, I've just lost interest. Next we have Flame in the Mist by Renee Ardier. This one I was not a fan of. There was just a lot of things that just didn't make sense. Any of these ones that I do have a review for, I will link down below. I'm fairly certain I have Flame in the Mist review because I think it was an e-arc that I received. But either way, I never continued the series and will never continue the series. Book 1 was just a little bit problematic and I didn't enjoy it as much as everyone else seemed to. So yeah, definitely won't be continuing that one. Next we have Beastly by Alex Flynn, and I honestly have no idea what happens about in this book. I don't even remember what it's about. I do not remember it at all. I know I read it, but I do not recall anything. So obviously it didn't have a lasting impact on me, so I don't think I need to continue the series. Next we have Stormheart by Cora Carmack. I read Raw and I did not enjoy it that much. There was a few problematic things for me. Again, I will leave this one linked down below my review. I'm fairly certain I have a review of this one. I remember writing it. But yeah, it was a little bit problematic for me and I was never interested in continuing the series and it just never happened. And I don't think it's going to happen now. Next we have Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. While I did enjoy this one, it was very slow and I did not like the romance at all. So I have no interest in continuing the series, or in continuing the duology. The second book, Wayfarer, is the final in the series, but I never was really intrigued. I did buy Wayfarer, but it sat on my shelves for probably 12 months and I finally unhauled it. Actually, it was probably longer than 12 months and I finally unhauled it not that long ago. So yeah, I just don't think that series is for me. It's just a bit too slow, and the romance I remember being a big part of why I didn't love that book. Next we have the Prosper Redding series by Alexandra Bracken. This is the second Alexandra Bracken on this list, which is weird considering I absolutely loved The Darkest Minds. I just didn't enjoy Passenger and I just didn't enjoy Prosper Redding. Prosper Redding is a middle grade and I just couldn't connect with it and I just didn't end up enjoying it as much as other people. I know some people were loving this right when it came out and I just wasn't one of them and I was never interested in continuing the series. Then we have Dimple and Rishi by Sanya Menon. This one I did not enjoy. It is a romance for one, but I remember wanting to read it because of the diversity and that, but I just didn't enjoy it. Both the main characters were very problematic and I just didn't enjoy that and it was never really rectified. So I wasn't interested and I'm definitely not interested in continuing, what is there, like 4 books now? I just don't care. Next we have The 100 by Cass Morgan. This one, I love the TV show and I finished reading the first book in the series and I enjoyed it, but it differs a lot from the TV show, and obviously the TV show came after the book, but I read the book before watching the TV show. I watched the TV show before reading the book, and I loved the TV show so much more than I did the book, so I will probably just stick to the TV show. I do have 1 season to go. I watched these ages ago when the last season, or the last 2 seasons maybe, weren't even out, and I still haven't gotten around to continuing because I want to do a full rewatch. But I'm currently doing that for Lucifer and I'm on the end of season 2 and there's now 5 seasons. So once I finish that, I might go back to the 100, but I'm pretty sure I will never continue the books. Next we have the Ascari series by Kristen Cicerelli. This one I remember not loving. I know I had this one as an e-arc, so I'll leave my review down below. But this one just didn't impress me as much as I thought it was going to be. It has a gorgeous cover, but yeah, the content, it just wasn't it for me, so I never ended up continuing the series. I was never even interested in continuing the series. I never even purchased the first book after reading it as an e-arc, which is usually the hint to say that I enjoyed the book, is if I read it as an e-arc and then ended up going and purchasing a copy for myself. Never happened for this one, so I was never going to continue. Next we have The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. This one was never gonna happen. I read the first 2 books a fair while ago, was right in the early stages of my blogging days, and while I did rate them higher than I would now, I didn't enjoy them as much as I did at the time, and I think that was a lot to do with the hype. I had it in my head that I was gonna love these books and I kind of forced that a little bit, and then when I got to book 3, I did start book 3 and I just couldn't do it. It just never happened. The books were slow and not much happened, and I'm not going to continue. I know a lot of people say just to read that series so you can get onto the other series in the same world because they're better, but I'm not going to push myself through 6 boring books or possibly boring books just to get to another series that might be better. Just not my thing. I'm not going to waste my time like that, so I don't think I'm ever going to be continuing anything of Cassandra Clare. Next we have Song of the Current by Sarah Tulsa. This one I did enjoy, but it's another one that I just kind of forgot about and I never ended up continuing the series. I always had it in the back of my mind that I was going to purchase the second book, but it just never happened, and now I've just lost interest. I have actually unhauled Song of the Current just because I think I'm never going to reread it and I'm probably never going to continue the series, so I may as well have just gotten rid of it, which is what I... Next we have Legend by Marie Lu. So I have read Legend and Prodigy from this series, but I never ended up finishing the series. Well, there was Champion was originally the end of the series, and then later on they released Rebel. So while I did enjoy Legend and Prodigy, they never stood out to me, and it was never a series that I was really like, yes, I need to continue this. I believe I read Legend and Prodigy during a readathon, which is most likely why I continued on to Prodigy, even though Legend didn't stand out to me. Unless one day there's a readathon and I need a book with a rose on the cover, because I'm pretty sure it's what's on the cover of Champion. Maybe I'll listen to the audiobook, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Next we have The Wounded Kingdom by R.J. Barker, and I read the first 2 books in the series. This is an adult fantasy series, and I enjoyed it, but being an adult fantasy series, I just found it slow, and that's what tends to happen for me with adult fantasy. I tend to find them very slow because there's a lot of build up of the world and the political intrigue and all that jazz, and I'm more into action, so they don't usually like really get to me. I did enjoy the first book and I did read the second book and I did enjoy it, but they weren't amazing, and I probably will never continue the series. The only reason I think I read book 2 was because I requested an e-arc of the second book, not realizing it wasn't the first book in a series, so I had to go and read the first book so I could read the second book. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have continued in a normal sense, but I did in that case because I needed to review it. Next we have Eveless by Sarah Holland, and this one again I did enjoy, but I had a few things that were a bit of an issue for me in it, and I just never ended up continuing the series. I did read an e-arc of Eveless as well, and I just never continued on to Evermore. Eveless just didn't intrigue me enough to want to continue on to the second book in the series, so I just never ended up doing it, and probably never will now. Next we have the Runebinder Chronicles by Alex R. Keller. This one I did not enjoy. I know I have a review for this one because I did receive this one as an e-arc, so I will leave the review link down below, but I remember not liking this one. I can't remember exactly now why I didn't like it, but I remember not loving it, so I will not be continuing this series. Then we have the Shatter Me series by Tahereh Mafi, and again, Shatter Me was okay. The first book in the series was okay, but it didn't blow my mind. I wasn't like, yes, I need to continue the series. So I just never ended up doing that, and I'm probably not going to do it now. So next we have His Fair Assassins by Robin Lefevre. This one, I read book 1, it was good, but it wasn't good enough that I was like, oh my god, I need to read this book, so I never ended up continuing the series. Next we have the Rondo series by Emily Rodda. This one is a book, honestly, like I had the first book in the series for years. I literally bought the first book at a Scholastic book fair in primary school, and I half read it, I think 2 or 3 times, but never actually finished it. So then after I got into blogging and fully into reading, I decided that I was going to finish this series. I read the first 2 books and I never continued. Next we have the Legacy of Orisha by Tomi Adeyemi. So this one I read book 1, Children of Blood and Bone, but I never ended up continuing to Children of Virtue and Vengeance. Children of Blood and Bone was fine, but again, it just didn't intrigue me enough to want to continue, so I never did. There's just other books out there that are more higher priority to me. This just wasn't one of them. Next we have The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is just too romance heavy, too flowery. It's just not my writing style that I enjoy, and I just don't enjoy romance that much. So yeah, I'm not going to continue the series. Next we have The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. This is another adult fantasy that I just found slow. I know a lot of people enjoy that about it, but it's just not my thing. I'd prefer action-packed. The only reason I think I even got through this book entirely was because I listened to the audiobook. I don't think I would have handled reading the entire thing myself, not reading through the audiobook. I just would have gotten bored and given up on it. Next we have the Abortion series by Garth Nix. This one was actually a DNF, so I read Sabriel. It was fine, it was good, it just was a little bit slow for me. So I started Lyriel and I just couldn't finish it. It was just slow and I just couldn't do it. So I did end up DNFing partway through one of the books in this one, so I don't think I'm going to be continuing the series. Next we have Something Dark and Holy by Emily A. Duncan. This one, the romance bothered me, and there was a couple other things that bothered me, but I remember the romance being the main one. The premise of this book really intrigued me and I thought I was gonna love it, but the execution, it was something to do with the plot at the end I didn't love. I'll leave my review link down below because I know I have one of this. It was something to do with the ending of the plot, just didn't make sense to me or something. I can't remember what it was, but I didn't love this. I'm not going to continue the series. Next we have The Wizards of Once by Cressida Cowell. I don't know how to pronounce that. This one, just no, it's just too childish for me. There are some middle grades that I love, and then there's other middle grades that they just feel like too childish. I'm not a huge fan of that stupid kind of humor, and I think that is what this book included a lot. I personally don't find that amusing at all. So yeah, this just wasn't for me. It just didn't work for me, and I found it super childish. Next we have Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. This one, I think if it didn't have the hype that it did and I didn't have such high expectations going into it, I probably would have enjoyed it more than I did. But I just had such high expectations. People were comparing it to Harry Potter and all this other stuff, and everyone was raving about it, and they still are, like, especially when the new books come out, everyone's still raving about the series. And personally, I just didn't find it lived up to the hype. So I didn't love it, and I never continued the series. Next, we probably have one of the most controversial on this list, and that is the Nevernight trilogy by J. Kristoff. And while we're at it, we might as well talk about Lifelike by J. Kristoff as well, because they're both on this list. So I've come to the realization that J. Kristoff's writing by itself is just not what I'm a fan of. I love his writing when combined with Amy Kaufman, but I'm just not a huge fan of any of his standalone stuff that I've read. Nevernight I had a few problems with, but for the most part it just didn't live up to expectations. Same with Lifelike. Lifelike was fine, but it just, again, didn't live up to this mass expectations that I had because everyone was loving it. I just found it slightly lacking, and I will never be continuing either of the series. So yeah, J. Kristoff I think is just not for me. Like I said, I love his stuff with Amy Kaufman, and I love some of Amy Kaufman's stuff by herself. Yeah, J. Kristoff by himself, I'm just not a fan. Next we have The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. This one is another one that I think it just didn't live up to the hype that people were giving it, and it just didn't intrigue me enough to want to continue. I wasn't like a huge fan or anything, and it just, yeah, it wasn't enough for me to be super interested in continuing and like really wanting to continue, so I never did. Next we have Unearthed by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. While it was good, I just didn't love it as much as I have other books, and I just didn't feel the need to continue. I loved the premise, I loved the idea, and I loved some parts of the book, but it just didn't quite live up to expectations, I guess. Next we have Gameiro, is that how you pronounce it? I have no idea. By Kat Chow, first book Wicked Fox. I read Wicked Fox, but it's just way too romance heavy for me. I love the idea of it, but yeah, it was just too romance heavy. It was fine, but I just couldn't really get into it, and nothing really intrigued me to pick up the second book. Next we have Aristotle and Dante by Benjamin Elias Seance. This one, I just didn't care for it at all. I'm not a romance reader, but there is some contemporaries that I do enjoy. I think for me, there is certain things that I love in contemporaries, and this one just didn't live up to that expectation. As I've said before, there is like two main contemporary writers that everything they write I just love. There's just something about it, and I think that just comes down to it just didn't have that something about it that I'm looking for when it comes to contemporary. I think I am a lot more harsh on contemporary than I am on, say, fantasy and stuff, just because I don't love the romances. So if the romance to me is just average, or like I just don't care, then I don't end up enjoying the book, mainly because with most contemporaries, the romance is the prime aspect of the book. So for me, Aristotle and Dante just didn't cut it, and I'm never going to continue. Next we have Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funk. This one, it was fine, I just didn't love it. My mum actually continued the series. I never ended up doing it, so yeah, just, it's not gonna happen. Next we have Tales of the Blackbone Witches by Jo Spurrier. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I read A Curse of Ash and Embers as an e-arc, but I did not end up loving it. It was just lacking. I didn't love the magic system. It just didn't have enough world building. So I never ended up continuing the series because I think I only gave this one like 3 stars. I just didn't love it. Next we have Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard by Rick Riordan. I probably could have talked about this one with Percy Jackson, but oh well. So I read The Sword of Summer. It just didn't impress me. I just don't think Rick Riordan's writing is for me. I kind of get the appeal, but it just doesn't appeal to me, and I've never ended up really loving any of the stuff. The only series of his I've actually finished is the Kane Chronicles, I think is that what it's called. I listened to that one on audiobook during a readathon, which if I hadn't listened to the audiobooks and it hadn't been during a readathon, I probably wouldn't have continued the series, but it was fine, so I ended up continuing it. It was quick, easy. I could get through it easily with the readathon, so that's why I continued it. But with Magnus Chase, I read The Sword of Summer, but I will not be continuing to The Ship of the Dead. Next we have The Narcs Invasions by Gabriel S. Prendergast. This one is a sci-fi, and this book, like the first book in the series, Zero Repeat Forever, had so much potential. It sounded like it was going to be such an interesting book, but it just didn't live up to that potential. I ended up rating, I think, 3 stars. I had a few problems with it, so I never ended up continuing the series and probably never will. I think there's only 2 books in the series. I think it's only a duology, but there just wasn't enough to Zero Repeat Forever for me to want to continue. Besides that cover, like the covers are really cool. I do remember that. Next we have The Young Elites by Marie Lu. So I probably could have talked about this one when I talked about Legend, but this one just didn't appeal to me that much. I enjoyed Legend definitely more than I did The Young Elites. I think it was a little bit too romance heavy, and I just wasn't a fan of the world or the characters, and I just wasn't connecting to it. So it was fine, but I never ended up continuing, and I won't. Next we have The School for Good and Evil by Salman Shanani. I think that's how you pronounce it. I really did not like that book. I read the first book, The Song for Good and Evil, and I just did not enjoy it. I will leave my review down below because I do know I have one. I just did not like it. So of course I was never going to continue the series. And what is it, like 6 of them now or something? No. Next we have The Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden. This one was another one that I had high expectations for, and it just didn't live up to those high expectations because everyone was talking about and loving these books, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it. Won't be continuing that one. Then we have The Beginning by Nestle Clergy. No, I will leave my review for this one down below as well. This was just frankly bad and never interested in continuing the series. I don't even know if I could finish the first book. I think I did because it's super short. I'm pretty sure I did. If I didn't, I'll put it on the screen, but I think I did. But this one was an e-arc and ended up reviewing it, and just no. The last series on this list, we have the Adroma Saga. This one's by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I did not like Zenith. It was just poorly written. I'm sorry, it just was. This one I know I have a negative review for. I received this one as an e-arc, and I know I have a negative review for it. So I'll leave that down below if you're interested. The one thing I do really remember about not liking about this book, and it actually stood out to me, like I read this ages ago, but it still stands out to me, and that is just the lack of editing. And I think the big thing was the authors would explain the exact same thing in like 4 different sentences in a row, but just change the words. Like they were talking about the exact same thing. You didn't need the 52 other sentences. I don't know. This book could have been like half as long as it was. And I think it really, for me, came down to the editing and catching things like that. They just didn't get caught. And no. For me, it was just poorly written, poorly edited. I did not like it. So yeah, that is all the books I need to talk about in my part 2 of this series. So part 3 won't be coming out for a few weeks because I have the like end of the month, start of the month type of videos coming out. So they'll be taking up my filming time, but I'm planning to have part 3 up on the 8th of September, and we'll be discussing the books that I will be continuing that are currently released. So I hope you guys are keen for that one. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do you agree with me for any of these series? Let me know. Is there any that I'm making a big mistake and I should continue? I don't know. Let me know. So yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next video.